Two brown trucks, two very popular nameplates. This is the 2023 Nissan Frontier. It's the Pro-4X trim. This is the 2023 GMC Canyon Denali. That was new for 2022. This is brand new right now. Both are taking very different approaches to how they use their engines, their off-road performance, and most of all, their technology. I'm going to show you all the differences because one is more traditional and one is really pushing the envelope. Years ago, the Nissan Frontier and the Toyota Tacoma were the longest lasting midsize pickup trucks. The domestic automakers sold them for a while, gave up, did it again, and they were all just pretty lackluster. The Frontier is the pickup truck that has kept on going and has kept on being one of the best-selling trucks in the entire segment. But that's not the case anymore. The GMC Canyon and its sister truck, the Chevy Colorado, are so much better now. They're redesigned in and out, and they're gonna give trucks like the Frontier a run for its money. Canyon equals chrome on the front, on the mirror caps, the door handles, and these 20-inch wheels. There's a lot more creases and more curves going on here. I'm not sure it'll last the test of time quite like that Frontier, but it certainly is interesting, especially these marker lights on the side fenders. They do help you at night when you're maneuvering, say, a dark campsite. That's nice, but to me, they just look cool and different. It's kind of hard to do that in a mid-sized truck, but here there's a lot of different curves. I like seeing this truck, but I don't like these side steps because they just kind of get in the way. And as tall as this truck is, it's not that big. The Frontier is smaller than the Canyon, believe it or not, including in height. It's 7 inches shorter. It's a big difference when you're getting in and out. I think overall, this look, it's cleaner, it's more classic, it's gonna last longer over time. The Pro-4X adds all that pretty hardware, the red tow hooks, the red Nissan badges, these darker wheels that look like they're bead locks. It's got real skid plates, LED headlights in the front that look very piercing and very crisp. It's a good looking truck. Even in the base form, it's still pretty decent. The ground's not totally level, but that doesn't matter. On any ground, the Canyon is taller, it's wider, and it has better approach and breakover angles than this Frontier Pro-X. This is a Denali, it shouldn't be like that, but for 2023, that's what the Canyon is giving us on every single trim. And on the Atiyeh 4X, it will tower over this even more. All that said, there's less choice when it comes to body configurations. The Canyon now only comes as a 4-door short bed. That's the 5-foot bed and the 4 full-size doors. There's no more extended cab and no more long bed. On the Frontier, you can get all that. You can even get the long 6-foot bed with this crew cab or get a king cab, which is that shorter bed with the long bed. So that means there's more flexibility, more choices when you buy the Nissan. The engines are very different with these two trucks, so let's see which side of the camp you fit on. A turbocharged inline 4 or a naturally aspirated V6. They both make identical horsepower despite the Nissan having more than a liter greater displacement. And despite this bigger engine, this makes more torque, but this gets the identical fuel economy as this Frontier. In fact, the Frontier beats it on the EPA highway estimate by 1 mpg. So the size differences don't always equate at the pump. 4-wheel drive systems are pretty much identical. You get the low range, the high range. This has driving modes, this does not. We'll get into that a bit later. And this is an 8-speed automatic and that's a 9-speed. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself how you're gonna use the truck long term. Do you want the power of a turbo, especially in the low end, or do you want that long-term reliability that everyone knows with Nissan's V6? That decision is yours. The Canyon is rated to tow 1,000 pounds more than the Frontier. Pretty significant difference that you can see right there. In terms of payload, they're almost even, and these two are not the top trims you want for the most payload. You gotta get the basest 2-wheel drive versions for that. The Canyon has a special feature in this tailgate, and you can't tell what it is until I do this. A waterproof little cubby here that runs the whole width. Haven't seen another truck that does that. Instead of having cargo boxes on the outside or on the inside wasting precious space, GMC puts it right here. I like that. There's also cargo lighting and there's 8 tie-down hooks and a power outlet. There's only 4 tie-down hooks and there's no special compartment here in the tailgate, but Nissan does bed rails better than anyone. All you gotta do is adjust this here. Any point, really doesn't matter. There's almost like an infinite number of points. You lock it in. And this is really solid metal. No other competitor does it quite this well. There's also cargo lighting and a power outlet on the other side. Back to basics with the Frontier. The seats are pretty comfy. There's nothing to relearn inside. It's the same Nissan you've all been driving for the last 10, 15 years. That's a good thing, or it's not a good thing. These leather chairs have red and orange stitching. I like that, and you could not get it before on the 2022 Frontier with the leather package. Now you can. It dresses up the interior, but it's still very old looking. The way the panels fit, the smaller screens, these knobs and switches, it's very easy to use and see and work around the Frontier, and that is the point of a mid-size pickup truck, but it just doesn't feel as upscale. I'll give the Frontier some more credit because even though the Canyon looks dressier inside, a lot of the plastics on the upper dash and the door panels are just as hard and a little brittle as they are in this Frontier. So they're about even. The back seat is tight, but there's also under-seat storage, but not under the seat I'm sitting in because we have the Fender stereo system with the sub. Subs are important, seating is not. When you're back here, it's basic. There's a power outlet, there's some USB ports, and that's it. The Frontier comes with an 8 or a 9-inch touchscreen. This is the 9-inch because it's the best model you can get. And there's some analog controls underneath, which is actually really helpful. It's pretty easy. Volume, scrolling, even tuning for bass, treble, balance. That is something you don't see anymore on modern car stereos. I like that. Like the Fender audio system that's inside here, it's kind of old school. This system's fine, and by fine I mean it works well enough, but it's pretty crude. It doesn't have half the systems that the GMC has, but what's good is that Apple CarPlay is now wireless for 2023. That's nice. But you're not going to find any of the fancy stuff that you would in the GMC, especially the cameras. These are just very low resolution, and they don't offer the same level of detail, though this side shot is very helpful when you're going around corners. The Frontier uses a classic analog design with a large central display that is useful for showing information at a glance. There's lots of safety features. You can adjust them mostly when you're parked, but a lot when you're driving as well. Emergency braking in the front and the rear, and a useful off-road gauge that shows your angles and whether the diffs are locked, where the torque is being routed. Some additional auxiliary gauges for the transmission oil temp and the voltmeter, oil pressure, oil temperature. But you're not going to find the level of complexity that you'll find in the GMC. Overall, that one has a lot more to show, and it shows it better. Between the two trucks, this one looks like it's $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 more expensive. That's because it feels more like an upscale Sierra at a much lower price point. The steering wheel, even the way the stitching and the colors are here, everything, even the panel gaps fit better than they do in that Frontier. And it's not like all the materials are better. This is still bone hard, but most everything you're looking at and touching is better. This is the Canyon, not the Sierra, and yet you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference inside. The quality is that much better. All the teak wood trim, the toggle switches, the big screens. It looks elegant inside here. And there's a good use of technology and real buttons, except on this side where there's no actual headlight switch. I'll get to that in a moment. But aside from that one frustration, this cabin feels premium, finally. It's just as cramped inside. Again, this is a mid-sized truck, not meant to be big. Under-seat storage. The seating is nicer back here. There's more bolstering here. Air vents, a power outlet. Again, better design than that Frontier, but not much in the way of space or amenities. This 11-inch widescreen is so much nicer than that 9-inch in the Frontier. Not only does it look newer, it's running Google, so I can have full native search. Take me to Boston, Massachusetts. That's a really terrible...
Basta pasta.
No,
All right.
You know, it's not perfect, but I'm also not perfect. This is pretty damn good though. Voice recognition, native Google Maps, really fast searching, a lot of online updates that you could never find before in other GM vehicles, and also a ton of information at a glance. Check all this out. The Nissan just looks so crude. Here, I mean, look at this, we're in 3D. Might as well be in 4D, I don't know. It's really, really good. Also, the off-road mode has a ton of information at a glance, so when you're driving, you can see all of this really clearly, switch to the cameras, and in any view, they're so much clearer than the Nissan. Look, I can still tell that's a Nissan over there. In the Nissan, I would not be able to tell this was a GMC. The clarity matters, and this GMC has it. Plus, you can also see the driving modes right here. And if you're not in the right four-wheel drive mode, it'll tell you on the instrument panel. There's a lot of active safety systems as well, including GM's safety alert seat, which vibrates instead of just flashes and beeps. That's really unique to GM. You won't find it anywhere else. And there's plenty of other features that are on this model, but every Canyon does have a decent amount of safety features as standard, including front pedestrian braking. Versus the Frontier, this is the modern system to have. Full screen Google Maps and all of this off-road information. There's a few more designs and elements you can add and change, but overall this is crisper, and at a glance, it's the one you want to have. This is where tech goes too far. Like Rivian and Tesla, there are no headlight controls on the side or on this new stock. It's actually in the touchscreen, in this little tiny obscure icon that's up there, or by going here, here's all my lighting controls. Yeah, this might seem intuitive now, but when you actually need to use this in a pinch, it's not easy at all. What's immediately apparent driving the Frontier? This V6 sounds way more refined than the Canyon. Not only is it quieter, it doesn't thrash. And that's just some nice old-fashioned intake snarl. And it doesn't sound raspy, it just sounds good. Nissan has been making large displacement V6s for, what, 2 decades now? The 3.5 liter, this 3.8. They put it in the Nissan Z. They kept it in the Frontier. All different variations of that. It's a good engine. And pairing this V6 to the 9-speed, which Nissan did a few years ago, that made such a big difference. And no, there's no paddle shifters or sport mode, but it just responds. It's not hunting around either. I really like it. I noticed some more tire hum, not much. Even though they're both wearing all-terrains, these tires are just a bit knobbier. And that comes through, but it's remarkably quiet in here too. The Canyon is quieter, but not by much. I think the V6 wins in the engine war. Yeah, it's working hard under acceleration, but it's getting up and going just as well, if not a little better than the Canyon. And it settles. There's definitely not as much low-end torque, so you do have to dip into the throttle a little bit more than the Canyon. The transmission has to hesitate just slightly to downshift into a couple lower gears, whereas that turbocharged Canyon is really right there in every moment. But I get the feeling that I'm in the Frontier, this engine is not working as hard. The Frontier has much heavier steering, especially at low speeds, but it lightens up a lot at normal roadway speeds. And really, the off-center feel doesn't feel that much different than the Canyon, because the Canyon has lighter, more accurate steering. This is not quite as precise, but off-center, considering this is the top Pro-4X off-road trim, it's really behaving very, very much the same. A little more correction to keep in a straight line, especially around some turns. But the Frontier makes up for that because it's narrower. It feels like a smaller truck because it is. A little bit more steering angle required, but these are not major differences. It just shows me that the Canyon is tuned that much better. But this Frontier, well, it's definitely several leagues ahead of where this truck used to be, so Nissan's definitely made the improvement. I think the Frontier really does find its groove in the 40 to 50 mile an hour range that you'll find on a lot of different back roads, 2-lane highways. The gear hunting doesn't really bother me too much because this transmission responds pretty quickly. You don't have to dip too far in. I keep talking about the response of that turbo engine, and it's better. If you want to keep things simpler, then Nissan is the way to go. You get a naturally aspirated V6. There's nothing crazy. There's no hybrid system. Really no advanced anything aside from an electronic locking rear diff. But the Tacoma is getting more complex. The GM and Chevy trucks, more complex. So is the Ford Ranger. Like, you want something back to basics that still performs really well. This Frontier, well, maybe it's the last frontier. It behaves really well for an off-road midsize truck. And while the pedal feel is a little softer than the Canyons, it still delivers some acceptable feel, it really does. There are no off-road or any different driving modes in the Frontier. It's simply a switch here, nice and analog to go into 4 high, another switch down here for hill descent control. And those are all the aids you get. Because Nissan figures, if you're driving off-road, well, what the hell, you know what you're doing. Despite there being about equal ground clearance, the Pro-4X to me does feel slightly cushier. A little bit more padding here. And the narrower width, just like I say when driving a Bronco versus a Wrangler. On trails where you don't have a wide open space, this pays dividends, it does. In the Canyon, you have to pay more to get a locking rear diff, because you gotta get the Atiyeh 4X. But on the Pro-4X, on the Frontier, you have that. Just a little button down here. I don't even need to engage it right now, because we're not doing anything that strenuous today, but it's there. And these Bilstein shocks, and they're definitely built different. I like the way they feel a little better than the Canyon, just slightly. It's really not that big of a difference. But knowing that you get all this capability for less money, and you can also get a 2-wheel drive version of this. Whoa! I was having too much fun. What I wanted to say is, you can get a 2-wheel drive version of the Frontier if you like to slide around a bit. That's not something you can do with the Canyon Atiyeh 4X. Compared to that Frontier, might as well be in a Corvette. In a mid-size pickup truck with a ladder frame and a live rear axle, this is dancing around curves like it's a car. It truly is. The steering is almost one finger light, like it's a Lexus. That's weird. There's a lot of control for the body. Gosh, dare I say the Canyon is really fun on roads. It really is. On the road, my goodness. That Nissan might be brand new for 2022, but it still drives like it's 2002. If you want to know how modern pickup trucks drive, get yourself in a Canyon. Yeah, really, the composure is great. It's quieter. It's way more refined, and considering this is the Denali, which has even more luxury trims inside, yes, it costs more, but I could be in the Elevation, save the money, and be roughly about even with that Frontier, with similar, if not better, performance everywhere. So, gosh, I'm having not really a tough decision. This is going to be an easy decision after driving this, I'm telling you. However, handling and quietness are not really why people buy pickup trucks. Those are very nice extras to have, and I think they're important. But that Nissan has a really good V6, and the efficiency is just as good as this 4-cylinder. So, as much as I love this 4-cylinder, I have to wonder, why not go with a simpler engine design if I want to keep it long term? GMC says that they've designed this 4-cylinder like a diesel, so it's supposed to have a lot of forged steel and other parts that really keep it together. What I do like especially, oh my goodness, thank you GMC, putting in brake rotors that are larger than 11 inches in diameter. These are over 13 inches front and rear. That is a very big difference versus the last generation Canyon. Thank goodness, because I wouldn't have been able to stop like that before. I would be inclined to live with this Turbo 4. I really would. I miss the diesel. I certainly don't miss the old, naturally aspirated inline 4 they had in this truck. But considering this is not a naturally aspirated big displacement V6 like that Frontier, it's putting up all the numbers and it's responding even better in the lower end. The thing is, Smaller turbocharged engines in larger vehicles always yield the exact same results every single time, because when fuel efficiency comes into play, they get the same. And that's what you're getting here with the Canyon. Look at the numbers. They're really nothing to brag about. And when you're on the gas or if you're towing, I can pretty much guarantee that this turbo engine is going to be dumping fuel compared to that Frontier. It will be. In terms of everyday response, I do like this engine, I really do. GMC says that they've engineered this engine to be more like a diesel, so it's stronger. I appreciate that. Keeping the turbo cooled, keeping all the internals properly lubricated is really, yes, it's engine design 101, but a lot of turbo engines, especially in pickup trucks, haven't worked out so well in their first generation. This engine is not all that old. So I hope GMC knows what they're doing. That tried and true V6 in the Nissan, gotta say, it's still pulling its weight. After all these years, it really is. It's really a difference of engineering philosophy here between these two trucks. But I will say, once everything's quieted down and you're on the highway, cruising straight, this Canyon is the most car-like. It is quieter. It is easier to place in a lane. This is the truck you want for the longer road trips. There are multiple off-road driving modes. One says off-road, one says terrain, and if you get the AT4X, you get a Baja mode. It's all well and good. You get a low-range transfer case. On this Denali, there's also a limited slip rear diff. There's lockers on the AT4X. What's really great is that while you're driving off-road, you have this nice big screen to show you all the readouts, the angles, the exact compass location. Makes it really easy at a glance to see all that. And while this truck doesn't have it yet, hopefully by the time you buy it, it'll come with underbody cameras front and rear, so you can see exactly what you're about to hit, hopefully not hit anything. No other truck in the segment has that. Plenty of torque in the low gears. We're in 4 high right now. I know this is in 4 low, there'd be a ton of torque multiplication. Don't feel like you're gonna really be in any bad situation or rut with this GMC. And just having the clearance is great. The only problem, let's be real, are these side steps. They're not removable and they come standard. You can't delete them from the factory. So if you do wanna take your Canyon off-road, I would suggest you don't buy a Denali. The 2023 GMC Canyon starts at $36,900. The 2023 Nissan Frontier is much more affordable, $29,370. And there's way more body configurations, 14 in total compared to just 4 on the Canyon. The Canyon as tested with the Denali package, $53,990 with destination. The Frontier Pro-4X with options fully loaded, $46,600 as tested. You can step down to a Canyon AT4 with some options, but still, the GMC is the more expensive truck. So you have to ask yourself, which truck is really worth it for you? The GMC Canyon delivers the performance, the on-road refinement, and a lot of technology. So much so that this feels like it's the next generation of trucks, and that Frontier feels like it's a generation behind. However, I will say you gotta be careful with the Canyon's price. This goes past $60,000 in some instances, whereas the Frontier is maxing out at just over $46,000. If you equip this right, and you can have very comparable trucks, and this one will feel more modern. But make no mistake, that Frontier is built to last and it's gonna satisfy a lot of people. So what do you think? What side are you on? And what trucks do you want us to review next? Tell us and subscribe to CarGurus. We will see you next time.